The acrid scent of burning diesel, the deafening roar of incoming artillery, and the terrifying, chaotic reality of localized street combat are entirely absent at the absolute apex of the military-industrial complex. You have successfully navigated the brutal, blood-soaked hierarchy of the private defense sector, completely leaving behind the heavily armored convoys, the dust-choked trenches, and the blood-stained tactical gear. You have officially ascended to the pristine, heavily guarded, and deeply soundproofed boardrooms located in the financial heart of Geneva, London, and Washington. You are now the chief executive officer of a massive, multi-billion-dollar transnational private military corporation. You no longer look at a glowing satellite map and see sovereign nations, desperate human populations, or tragic humanitarian crises unfolding in real time. You strictly see vast unexploited market volatility, profound systemic geopolitical vulnerabilities, and highly lucrative zones of kinetic arbitrage. The general public naively clings to the comforting, heavily manufactured illusion that modern armed conflicts are the tragic, unavoidable result of ancient ethnic hatreds, sudden diplomatic failures, or the unpredictable, violent ambitions of rogue regional dictators. As the untouchable architect of the modern shadow economy, you know the chilling absolute truth. Modern warfare is not a tragic accident. It is a highly engineered, meticulously calculated financial instrument, and you are the premier portfolio manager of global chaos. Your corporate commodity is not software, silicon microchips, or consumer real estate. Your primary, highly devastating export is asymmetric leverage, and your elite, completely insulated offshore shareholders demand aggressive quarterly growth in a global market, where lasting diplomatic peace is fundamentally catastrophic for your business model. Your daily executive routine does not involve reviewing minor tactical troop deployments, authorizing localized strike missions, or managing the trivial logistics of ammunition supply lines. It begins with an incredibly complex algorithmic, macroeconomic analysis of global resource vulnerabilities and sovereign debt profiles. You actively and methodically hunt for structural fragility. You identify a developing nation, perhaps located deep within the resource-rich heart of the global South, possessing massive, completely unextracted deposits of rare earth minerals, lithium, cobalt, or crude oil, but currently burdened by a highly fragile, newly elected, and deeply inexperienced coalition government. To a conventional Wall Street investment banker, this inherent geopolitical instability represents an unacceptable, massive financial risk that must be avoided. To you, it is an incredibly lucrative, pristine blank canvas waiting to be violently painted. You absolutely do not send columns of heavily armed mercenaries across their sovereign border to initiate a crude, highly publicized invasion. That is an amateurish, highly illegal tactic from a completely bygone era that invites unwanted international sanctions. Instead, you deploy untraceable offshore capital as your invisible vanguard. Long before the very first rifle bullet is ever fired in anger, you utilize a sprawling, deeply encrypted network of anonymous shell companies to quietly, aggressively short the target nation's fragile currency on the global exchange, deliberately triggering a catastrophic hyperinflationary spiral. Simultaneously, you funnel millions of dollars in dark money through seemingly benevolent non-governmental organizations to actively fund heavily disenfranchised, highly radicalized political opposition groups within their borders, secretly providing them with sophisticated encrypted communication arrays and untraceable digital currency. You are essentially providing the highly sophisticated, completely invisible venture capital for a devastating civil war, patiently and brilliantly nurturing localized political grievances into full-scale, violently irreversible ethnic polarization. You fundamentally understand a terrifying, an undeniable economic reality. A stable, peaceful society possesses the organizational capacity to independently extract and sell its own national wealth on the open market. but a society actively tearing itself apart in the burning streets desperately requires expensive, highly specialized outside assistance just to secure its vital national infrastructure. Once the artificial, highly calculated friction you quietly funded inevitably ignites into chaotic, highly televised urban warfare, and the desperate civilian population begins to flee the burning capital city, you seamlessly transition into your most powerful and profitable role, the indispensable global savior. As the target nation's official military apparatus begins to completely fracture along ethnic lines, and the terrifying footage dominates the international news networks, you leave your offshore sanctuary and travel directly to the heavily fortified political capitals of the Western world. You sit in opulent, highly secure dining rooms conducting private, unrecorded meetings with untouchable foreign policymakers, deeply compromised defense committee chairmen, and desperate national intelligence directors who are terrified of a sprawling regional collapse. You absolutely do not offer them a massive deployment of their own official uniformed military forces, which you know is politically toxic, financially ruinous, and completely unpalatable to their war-weary voting public facing an upcoming election cycle. Instead, you offer them the ultimate, highly expensive geopolitical luxury, absolute plausible deniability. You present a flawlessly polished, highly detailed macroeconomic presentation demonstrating exactly how your elite, completely unacknowledged corporate military assets can quietly, surgically stabilize the critical foreign resource extraction zones without committing a single official government soldier, thereby avoiding a highly publicized national tragedy or a prolonged, unpopular congressional debate. Through masterful psychological manipulation, aggressive corporate lobbying efforts, and the strategic placement of lucrative post-retirement corporate board seats, you successfully secure incredibly lucrative, multi-billion-dollar black-budget contracts to provide specialized tactical training, advanced logistical airlift capabilities, and critical infrastructure defense for the failing foreign regime. The heavily scrutinized politicians get to publicly project decisive international strength and moral resolve while maintaining entirely clean diplomatic hands, and your private corporation successfully secures an exclusive, highly lucrative monopoly on state-sanctioned violence in the region. With the massive government defense contracts officially signed and the billions in federal funding securely routed to your untouchable offshore holding accounts, you finally activate the devastating kinetic arm of your massive corporate empire. You deploy your highly specialized, heavily armed private contractors directly into the burning theater of operations. But you must implicitly understand that your ultimate strategic objective is absolutely not to achieve a swift, decisive military victory. Crush the rebellion and restore lasting democratic peace to the region. A rapid, successful resolution to the conflict would immediately and permanently terminate your incredibly lucrative monthly billing cycles and force your expensive private army to demobilize. Your absolute strategic mandate is to carefully, meticulously manage the bleeding. You order your elite tactical commanders to establish highly fortified, completely self-sufficient corporate green zones strictly around the failing nation's most valuable, highly strategic economic assets: the massive deep-water export ports, the sprawling industrial lithium mines, and the highly vulnerable crude oil refining facilities. You deliberately, coldly leave the chaotic, burning civilian urban centers and the impoverished rural villages to the absolute mercy of the local fanatical militias, actively utilizing your overwhelming firepower solely to secure the vital economic arteries that directly feed your international corporate supply chains. When the desperate, completely bankrupt host government inevitably realizes they can no longer afford to pay your exorbitant, deeply inflated monthly security invoices in liquid fiat currency, you flawlessly execute the ultimate corporate takeover. You force their desperate, highly compromised president, who is currently hiding behind your private security detail, to sign over the exclusive 99-year extraction rights to their own sovereign natural resources as direct, non-negotiable collateral for your continued military protection. You have successfully bypassed the traditional, highly scrutinized mechanisms of international commerce and legitimate diplomacy. I actively and brilliantly conquering an entire sovereign economy and looting its generational wealth without ever officially declaring a war or raising a national flag. As the highly engineered proxy conflict drags agonizingly into its third, fourth, and fifth years, your executive role fundamentally evolves from a simple military commander into a complex, highly sociopathic macroeconomic thermostat. You utilize highly advanced, deeply classified predictive algorithms, artificial intelligence threat modeling, and massive localized data harvesting networks to perfectly calibrate the exact necessary level of daily kinetic violence required to maintain your absolute geopolitical leverage. If the host nation's official government forces unexpectedly begin to gain a decisive, overwhelming tactical advantage that actually threatens to definitively end the civil war, you subtly, invisibly intervene to level the playing field. You intentionally restrict their vital ammunition supply chains, citing bureaucratic delays, severely delay critical mechanical maintenance on their armored troop transports, or temporarily withdraw your highly advanced aerial drone surveillance support, deliberately allowing the desperate rebel factions to momentarily regroup, securely rearm, and launch a devastating counterattack. Conversely, if the violent insurgents threaten to completely overrun the capital city, topple the puppet government, and permanently destabilize your highly profitable mining operations, you immediately authorize a devastating, highly targeted kinetic strike by your elite Tier 1 ghost units to violently, surgically decimate the rebel leadership and restore the highly profitable tactical stalemate. You are actively, brilliantly playing both sides of a heavily rigged, incredibly bloody, multidimensional chess match, expertly ensuring that the underlying geopolitical tension remains perpetually, agonizingly unresolved. You recognize with terrifying, absolute clarity that the most lucrative financial environment in the modern industrialized world is absolutely not lasting peace, and it is certainly not total nuclear annihilation. It is the agonizing, deeply profitable, and completely unsustainable purgatory of the forever war. You look at the detailed, highly classified human casualty reports scrolling across your encrypted digital tablet, not as a tragic, heartbreaking ledger of lost human lives, destroyed families, and shattered local communities, but strictly as a complex, highly sanitized metric of operational expenditure, equipment depreciation, and regional market penetration. After a decade of masterfully orchestrating this invisible, highly destructive symphony of global manipulation, you sit completely alone in your pristine, high-altitude corporate office, calmly watching your corporation's stock ticker violently surge to unprecedented record-breaking heights on the international exchange following a massive, highly publicized bombing in the distant capital city you secretly manage. You have successfully achieved the ultimate, terrifying pinnacle of unchecked, hyper-militarized capitalism. You have completely and irreversibly commodified human suffering, transforming the chaotic, heartbreaking collapse of an entire sovereign developing nation into a highly predictable, incredibly robust corporate revenue stream that consistently pays dividends to your shareholders. You are the untouchable, invisible god of the modern global shadow economy, a man who literally mints billions of crisp, clean dollars directly from the dark blood, mathematically and deliberately spilled on foreign soil. The heavily armed, deeply traumatized mercenaries dying in the mud and the countless innocent civilians caught in the unrelenting crossfire are utterly oblivious to the terrifying fact that their immense daily suffering is simply a localized operational expense meticulously factored into your global profit margin. But as you calmly sip your aged whiskey, staring out at the peaceful city skyline, and prepare to actively engineer your next highly profitable regional collapse on a completely different continent, a chilling, highly classified reality begins to surface within your own corporate research and development division. The massive, deeply traumatized human ghost armies you have painstakingly built are becoming increasingly expensive to maintain, highly unpredictable under extreme psychological stress, and severely legally burdensome to the corporation. Stay tuned, because the terrifying, deeply concealed reality of how these multi-billion-dollar private defense megacorporations are actively, aggressively preparing to permanently replace their expensive human mercenaries with fully autonomous, highly weaponized artificial intelligence drone swarms is about to be completely exposed, revealing a terrifying, inescapable near future, where the catastrophic decision to pull the trigger is no longer made by a human soldier, but entirely by an unaccountable, cold, algorithmic profit margin.